privilege. I have the privilege to actually lead you to what I think is a very interesting program, which is fostered by the EBC, European Brain Council. And it's a series on illnesses. This time it's Rethinking Schizophrenia. And the idea is really to have a view on, let's say, this illness in different countries. So we are the third of three countries. And Pavel Moore will actually introduce the view on Czechia, and we have another one on Denmark. This time we call it Rethinking Schizophrenia in Germany, Schizophrenia and Brain Health, AI-supported prediction and intervention, a comprehensive approach to integrated biopsychosocial schizophrenia care. So in this title, we have two aspects. One is early prediction and intervention. And with that, have actually AI tools which actually help us to coordinate what we have. So I think we have a series of four altogether, because one of the sort of presentations won't take place as Bianca Rudolph is not able to participate. But we have, and here you see the panel, we have altogether 5 talks. We will, with the introduction, 6. So we will start with Pavel Moore. He is actually professor of psychiatry and clinical chair at the National Institute of Mental Health in Prague. As you can see, so Pavel will come and introduce the program. Next person will be then Professor Koutsouleris from Munich, early detection intervention. And then we go to a more biologically prone topic, from genetics to animal models, by Professor Holter Koch, Munich in addition. And then I think we come down to what I think is important for, let's say, an optimal care for patients with schizophrenia. The question is, can we actually reduce the inpatient, let's say, modalities by a so-called inpatient equivalent psychiatric care step? Professor Beckdorf will give a talk on that. And then Professor Lenzer will actually give an intro on lifestyle and exercise interventions and a brief presentation on patient engagement. Then we will actually go and look at the relative and sort of the patient's perspective. After then taking a few questions, we will then go to a roundtable in order to discuss that and then have final remarks at 4 o'clock. So with that, I'd like to welcome you all. And I think it's a very interesting topic. And you would say, yes, we know everything about schizophrenia and we look after our patients quite well. But you will see in the coming minutes that there is room for improvement, and there are innovations along which need to be implemented in the care of patients with schizophrenia. So with that, I'm happy to hand on to Professor Pavel Moore from Czechia. As I said, he is professor of psychiatry and clinical chair of the National Institute of Mental Health in Prague. Please, Pavel, give us an introduction to the Rethinking Schizophrenia Project.
Okay, thank you, Peter, for a very nice introduction, and hello to everyone. This is my great pleasure to just briefly actually introduce you the project Rethinking Schizophrenia, which was an initiative led by the European Brain Council, and together with the European Psychiatric Association, we actually collaborated in like 3 steps, and now we are at the stage 3 of this project. The idea behind this project was actually first to look into the patient's pathway, to look into the care way how the patients are actually from the very beginning actually progressing into the late stages and what can be improved along the way. So this is a little bit different approach because along the way we can't actually find a lot of gaps which can be filled in. So first step for the first stage of this project was actually interviewing the users of the care, people who have experience with schizophrenia, with psychotic disorder. And we asked them a lot of questions, what from their perspective is missing, what are the gaps, what can be improved. And based on their input, we actually went on to the phase two, which was a questionnaire which we developed in collaboration with our advisory board, consisted of the most prominent psychiatrists in Europe. And we distributed this questionnaire anonymously online to experts, mental health experts, namely psychiatrists in 9 European countries. So we got a picture. Of course, it's not quite representative, but actually we are able to assess the models in non-European countries and actually get the feedback from the mental health experts in the field. So we got together 203 responders, mostly 3/4 were psychiatrists. And we did a qualitative analysis of the content, and we are able. I'm happy that just last month we were able to publish the results in the Journal of the European Psychiatry. Next one, and just very briefly, what we found, and this is sort of a not surprising picture, that the actually mental health specialist experts are deeply dissatisfied with the current state of the care for schizophrenia patients in their country. So more than 50% of them, they consider to be the national schizophrenia care system be sort of inadequate. And almost 3/4 reported that the community mental health services are not completely or only partially available. And almost half of them, there are no services on the early detection of psychosis. Next one, please. Can I have next slide, please? Yes. So it's not surprising that people who have a first episode of psychosis or schizophrenia, they are hospitalized. But what we found out, that there is a sort of a discontinuity in the care from the early onset, from the first episodes to the long-term follow-up. So there are some sort of an inconsistent follow-up. And also we were able to identify the major barriers like the lack of social support, still unmet need in the management of cognitive symptoms and negative symptoms. And also there is a lack of, let's say, psychotherapeutic or alternative approaches which could help the patients. Next one, please. And can I have, yes. Actually, and this is a summary. This is like the result, this figure, which is actually showing like two possible ways how the patient pathway from the very beginning can develop. So we have some factors which are contributing to the prolongation, extending this pathway, like the under-recognition of symptoms. Still, there is a widespread stigma and discrimination of people with schizophrenia. There is a comorbidity of substance use and others, physical comorbidity and disruption in services. But there are also factors which can be considered positive, like if we have early recognition services for risk populations, have a high quality assessment, functional characterization, we develop the therapeutic alliance with patients and also with their families and with the social network they are living in, and to try to integrate the pharmacological and non-pharmacological interventions that would actually, we believe, would actually shorten the pathway and lead to the most favorable outcome of this illness, and we can actually also tackle the neurobiology underlying this illness if we really take care of the symptoms and of the needs. Then we can improve the lives of our patients. Next one, please. And this is the study conclusion. This is actually the phase 3 of the Rethinking Schizophrenia Project, and this stage 3 is actually focusing on the 3 countries and looking into deep what actually are their strengths and what are their limitations. And those 3 countries, first it was Poland, then Denmark, and now we are talking about Germany. And this is the strategic action points that we are able to actually issue some policy recommendation, because this is not just about talking about what's missing and what can be done. We also have to, approach the policymakers and tell them, we think this is the system which might actually work. So these are the major 8 points, like to strengthen early detection and intervention, to facilitate equitable access to innovative treatment, including AI. I'm happy that we'll be talking about AI today. To promote a coordinated approach and continuity of care models, to expand access to psychosocial interventions. What is very interesting also, we don't talk too much about social environmental determinants of health and its role for mental health and cognitive development, of course, recovery, rehabilitation, workforce capacity and training. And last but not least, to actually secure enough funding for research and data-driven decision making. Thank you for your attention. Back to you, Peter.
Thank you very much, Pavel. That was a very nice introduction. So we will have time at the end of the presentations to actually have questions. So we come to the next talk. As you have nicely introduced, one of the tasks we need to actually tackle is to reduce the length from prodromal symptoms when people are really sort of coming into an adequate treatment. And therefore, Nicholas Kotsouleris, who is actually holding a chairman position as chair of precision psychiatry at the University of Munich, and Dr. Franzen, who is a senior physician from Lübeck Psychiatry, and they will talk about AI in early detection and intervention innovations. Please, Nikos and Leo. Nikos, please.
Thank you, Peter, for the kind introduction. It's a pleasure to be on the webinar with everyone today. And I'm really glad to see that AI is an important topic to be discussed. And I agree absolutely with all its pros and its cons. I would like to focus today on the first episode of psychosis in particular, because I think this is a crucial stage where actually a lot of treatment decisions are made, and also which determines potentially the long-term outcome of these individuals. Let me start with a more historic slide. So one quite famous, I'm a fan, everyone knows that, Peter in particular. I'm a fan of Gerd Huber, old German psychiatrist from the last century, who was a very meticulous psychopathologist and particularly interested in the long-term course and the trajectories of schizophrenia. And he basically identified that there is a huge heterogeneity of these courses, to the point that he said, following those people actually over 20 years and longer and visiting them at home, he really said that at no point in time is it possible to look into the future based on the symptom constellations that these people have. And that was a kind of disillusioning statement at that time. The question is, whether new technologies, including artificial intelligence, could help us maybe to shed a bit of light into that black box and see whether indeed there is a way to predict the course of the diseases. We have done a couple of studies in that on that topic. One early study already 10 years ago that we published this. I just want to bring it up because I think it's an interesting study in the sense that it's a multi-site study that delivered the databases for our machine learning analysis, for AI modeling. It was an RCT done across more than 40 European sites with the goal basically to compare different antipsychotics against each other. And the patients were really deeply phenotyped and followed over time accurately, and they had also measures of functioning after 1 year, which we tried to predict using clinical data. And you can see from this figure here that the accuracy of this algorithm, which was validated in a leaf side out approach, this is kind of the state of the art at the moment, together with external validation, obviously. This performed decently well, and it found also that there were features like current occupation, needs of the individual for company, but also psychological distress and a previous depressive episode and a previous diagnosis of schizophrenia that predicted the long-term outcome, a 1-year outcome of these individuals. What was interesting is that it did not only predict functioning after a year, but it was a proxy for a much broader construct of recovery. So people who were predicted to have a poor outcome, they basically dropped from the study earlier. They were much more likely to be rehospitalized, and they had lower quality of life across different domains. But what was more interesting, I think, for the study, and this is relevant for treatment decisioning, is that the algorithm actually was informative of heterogeneity, of treatment outcome heterogeneity. So we looked again at the predicted strata of that algorithm. So people with a predicted good outcome or a predicted non-recovery. And you see here in the comparison of the medications that in the good outcome, predicted good outcome people, there was basically no difference in antipsychotics effectiveness. When you look, however, into the stratum of people with a predicted poor recovery, there very clearly massive differences emerged to the point that people who were treated with amisulpride were much more likely to develop a good outcome despite the algorithm's prediction. And the opposite was the case for quetiapine. So indeed, these algorithms, these tools could be helpful to disentangle treatment heterogeneity. With a caveat, though, and I would like to put the finger into the wound, as we say here, because, all these algorithms need to be externally validated. So what's the state of external validation in the field? It's very poor. So you see, in general in medicine, that the studies that reported predictive models here with these bars, those studies that did an external validation are that small. So it's a small fraction, and mental health is no exception to that rule. And there's also evidence that there is a lot of bias in these studies, publication bias, population biases, outcome bias, and so on and so forth. So we need to be really skeptical about the validity of this field of research. And I say that as someone who has done these analysis for many years. So we really need to prove what the generalizability is. And we tried to do this in a study that was published a few years ago in Science by Adam Chakrut and other colleagues. And we found basically that clinical prediction models are relatively fragile. And this is a study which was, on the one hand, welcomed. On the other hand, it was heavily criticized. I have mixed feelings, to be honest, with you about that study. Why? Because it's over-conservative. So it tests generalizability of clinical prediction models for first episode schizophrenia, so how people remitted from the condition within a certain time frame. And it tried to validate across different population cohorts, different social demographics, and so on. And you can see that the more distant the validation sample is from the discovery sample in terms of its social demographics, clinical characteristics, the more difficult the validation becomes. One of my colleagues at my London team took this very seriously, this finding. And he basically was interested in predicting depressive episodes in first episode psychosis. So Sergio did this analysis trained on the UFAS data that I just showed and validated that model on the race data from the US. And he found actually very good generalizability, to our big surprise. So it's really depends on how you select these samples, on how unfair you are to your model, what you see then in terms of generalizability. And he also took this model, not only, he didn't stay with first episode schizophrenia, or psychosis, but he took the model to first episode psychotic depression. And there he also saw that it generalizes. And not only that, he found a similar effect of treatment signal enrichment. So people in this RCT, in the STOP PD study, who received sertraline, in those people, the model did not work at all. But in those people who received placebo, the model was quite good in predicting outcome. So again, you can beat a model's prediction through the right treatment, which is a very good indication that these AI systems can be informative for future outcome. Last point for my talk today is the analysis of bias. I think Pavel mentioned that. AI needs to be discussed in terms of the opportunities it provides for patients. And one critical aspect is whether it provides opportunities which are biased, right? And if models are biased, then we have a big issue if we want to deploy them at a large scale. So we need to really understand how ethnicity, medication, symptom change subgroups, and so on moderate AI systems performance. So this is the ideal situation where you have no bias, and obviously the bias situation where for some subgroups it works, whereas for others it doesn't work at all. So Fiona Coates did this also from a London team, and she took 2 schizophrenia samples. Again, UFAS, I've mentioned this twice now, first episode sample, and the old Katie data set, which we worked on together with Christoph Corell. 2 very different stages of the disease. First episode, chronic or established schizophrenia, and she again trained a model to predict remission in these people in the future. And used one sample to train and the other one to validate, and vice versa. And she found that the good old Andreasen remission criterion, the symptomatic remission criterion, actually is a good target. So it validates really nicely, even across different disease stages. Training in first episode, validating in chronic, and the other way around. And then she looked into biases. And what she found is quite interesting. So the model performed differently, particularly according to sex. So in male patients, the accuracy was about 70%. In females, it was 65%. That doesn't sound much, but actually it is a lot. If you scale such a system to the population level, these 5% are many, many thousands of individuals which would receive a wrong prediction just because of their sex. Interestingly, she did not find an effect of ethnicity on the model. So this was not informative of model's performance. Let me put these things together. Where do we stand in terms of developing AI systems? We need to train these signatures. This is the easy part. What we need then to do is to do thorough benchmarking for generalizability, for calibration, for sensitivity, interpretability, and so on, before we enter these models into clinical trials. We also need to assess how much do they generalize across different conditions, from schizophrenia to psychotic depression and other diagnostic entities. And finally, we need to use these systems to better understand mechanisms, because otherwise I think it's really these AI tools remain black boxes, and we will always have an issue of trustworthiness and transparency if we don't understand the mechanisms that lead to a certain model having that performance A versus performance B. And with that, I'm happy to close my talk, and I think questions for later, right, Peter?
Yes, yes. So thank you very much for giving us a good intro. into predictive medicine as it is today. And so I'm happy now to hand over to Sabine Hölte-Koch. She is a biologist and actually a head of the division of mental health at the Helmholtz Society. So that's the next talk coming, talk 2. We just need to carry on because it will be from genetics to animal models. Yeah. No, that is.
Peter, I got 2 slides just quickly.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry then.
Just tagging along with Nico's topic on AI.
Okay. Yeah.
I was going to introduce our PASTA project. So PASTA is
Sure.
obviously a nice food for adolescents, the ones we're testing. But also
Sure.
I want to focus on a very specific group, so the preterm group, because these are known to develop psychiatric disorders more often during their teens. And so what we have done, just as a brief intro, pivot forwards, Tao.
Yeah, looks good.
There we go. We have access to the German neonatal network. That's a cohort of 24,000 kids followed since birth. And we have been fortunate enough to test 350 adolescents now. That age 10 to 14 to develop and use a multidimensional approach to develop a specifically tailored assessment. We're using for that visual motor skills, reading cognition, current mental health status, and also eye tracking as a potential biomarker amongst several other domains like genetics, brain, and environment. And so just want to share 2 findings from our preliminary results with you. And so these are that if we just look at visual skills from a standard test, we find that preterm adolescents are performing worse, but also that one in orange scales quite nicely with gestational age or pregnancy duration, which is a link that we haven't found in the full-term control group. And if we move on and add the motor skills to it, so visual motor integration, the picture gets even worse in terms of skill level, but the association remains similar. So that is quite interesting. It's a very early stage. But since our group also has been showing very elevated psychiatric symptoms across the board during that very early age, and we found some statistical link, we are hopeful that once we throw that into the machine and also validate it, as Nikos nicely showed, and add environmental and genetic data that we also have at our hands, we may be moving towards some fingerprint of these preterm population that could help us to keep the preterms healthy and happy in the long run and not or intervene before crisis or even psychosis may occur. That's about it.
Thank you. I think, Leon, that was a nice second package on sort of coming from prediction and now going into a vulnerable population and see how we can use techniques in order to actually focus then on persons with an increased vulnerability. But now I like to switch to the second talk. It's by Sabine Hölte-Koch. She is heading the Institute of Experimental Genetics, Helmholtz, Munich. And we invited her because I think the question is really, what about all those genes and what about all we know in schizophrenia? Can we actually model the illness? And this is something Sabine is following on. Please.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Peter. So I'm a behavioral neuroscientist and I try to leverage what we can learn from genetics. So I moved one too far. How can I? Yeah, thank you. So one barrier to the successful treatment of psychiatric disorders is the deficit in understanding the underlying pathogenic mechanisms. And we know already from several genome-wide association studies, hundreds of common genetic variants in humans that all make only a small contribution to the risk for schizophrenia. None of these genes is on its own sufficient to cause schizophrenia. And there are only a few variants existing that confer a high risk to schizophrenia, but these variants are not common. Quite the contrary, they are very rare. And now we need to connect this genetic variation to biological functions and to understand how mechanistically they contribute to psychiatric disease. And our goal is to determine how multiple variants converge onto downstream pathways and brain functions, and also how they conspire to increase phenotypic risk. And it is nowadays possible to investigate large gene sets by using machine learning and data-driven approaches. And because psychiatric diseases usually involve altered brain function, and because we know from imaging studies which brain areas are involved, our approach is to look at the expression of schizophrenia risk genes in the brain and to use the brain transcriptome to determine how multiple genes likely are involved in the disease pathogenesis due to similar brain expression. And the brain transcriptome, that is the collection of RNAs expressed in a given cell or brain region. It tells us where and when a gene will be expressed. And this gene expression is not all over the place. It is regionally specific. And very often also temporally controlled. And this information helps us to better understand the function of a specific gene. And we can employ clustering methods based on brain expression to group together genes with similar expression patterns and deduce from that likely similar functions within the brain. And with the resulting gene networks, it is possible to functionally annotate genes, prioritize them as potential therapeutic candidates, and identify phylogenetically conserved functions between mice and humans. And this can then increase reliability and confidence in the translatability of the findings. And in brain research, we are lucky with the availability of the Allen Brain Atlas. The most anatomically comprehensive and widely used atlas are the Allen Human Brain Atlas and the Allen Mouse Brain Atlas. So for the human, there's transcriptome data freely available for more than 20,000 genes based on 6 donor brains. And for the mouse, there's information available for more than 19,000 genes with an even better spatial and cellular resolution than what is available for the human. And these data sets allow us to perform a cross-species comparison and to focus on those genes where the relevant parameters align between mouse and human. And for the mouse, for the mouse, we can use the large-scale phenotypic data for this cross-species comparison that was developed by the International Mouse Phenotyping Consortium. This is a consortium that is distributed across the globe and shares together the task to produce one knockout mouse line for every protein coding gene that the mouse and the human have in common. Use this data for the cluster analyses that I talked about to choose relevant genes based on their phenotypes and investigate them for their expression in the brain using the Allen Brain Atlas. And here you see a schematic representation of our analysis strategy. We integrate the information that we have about disease-relevant genes in humans with the information about the phenotypes that these genes cause in mice, and look for convergence in both species in the expression of these genes in disease-relevant areas or networks in their brains, with the goal to deepen our understanding about the function of these genes and to possibly identify new targets for further exploration. And we have recently employed this approach using pre-pulse inhibition of the acoustic startle reflex as a phenotype. Pre-pulse inhibition is a measure of sensory motor gating ability of the brain, and it is a phenotype that can be altered in schizophrenia, but not in all cases, and it can also be altered in other neurodevelopmental disorders. So it is related to schizophrenia, but it is not specific to schizophrenia. And the advantage of it is that it can be measured in both humans and mice. It is a very robust, reproducible phenotype that reflects alterations in brain function, and it is a phenotype that is evolutionarily conserved and can be found in practically all species. So for our analysis, we used 188 genes from the available IMPC data at the time, which were more than 4,000 phenotyped lines. And these 188 genes produced a PPI, so pre-pulse inhibition phenotype in mice. And for the humans, we used the information that we got from these two studies here in the middle. We used all GWAS variants that were identified in the study by Trubetskoy and colleagues in 2022. And we also used the rare exon-wide significant variants that were identified by Singh and colleagues in the same year. So we clustered and enriched the mouse pre-pulse inhibition genes and the human schizophrenia variant genes into groups or networks based on their specific mapping to brain regions that are known to be involved in both pre-pulse inhibition and schizophrenia. And with this approach, we then grouped together genes with similar functions and could then see how the schizophrenia variant genes and the mouse pre-pulse inhibition genes come together, all based on the assumption that genes with similar functions will be expressed similarly and interact with each other in networks within the same cells. So again, yeah. And this construction of pre-pulse inhibition and schizophrenia co-expression networks identified genes involved in glutamatergic signaling and in synaptic function, which means that we found a good convergence of the expression of pre-pulse inhibition genes in the mouse and schizophrenia-associated genes in the human in pre-pulse inhibition and schizophrenia-relevant brain regions. And that meant that we could use this approach again to identify potentially novel genes that may play a role in the development of schizophrenia and could potentially be new targets for treatments. So we ran the same approach again now on a larger data set of more than 7,000 IMPC lines. We took all the genes that caused an alteration in pre-pulse inhibition and again focused on those with matching mouse-human expression in pre-pulse inhibition and schizophrenia-relevant brain regions. And this analysis resulted in 20 new interesting genes that might be worth pursuing and have not yet been associated with schizophrenia previously. And we're currently investigating in more detail what is known about these genes and their functions to decide which ones to explore further. And with this, I would like to thank all my colleagues from the IMPC who generated all that data, and particularly Lillian Garrett and Dietrich Trümbach, who spearheaded this analysis approach.
Thank you very much, Sabine. So if you just scan back, so we started with early identification and then the possibility of prevention. And now we come from a behavioral abnormality in an animal, look at the genetic basis, and then transform it, bring it to schizophrenia. And with that, open up new, let's say, avenues of, let's say, genetic risk. So then as the next step, we go to two talks, which actually come down to important issues of care. So first is the question is... So thank you very much. I think that the first question is, can we actually reduce the days in an inpatient, let's say, setting for patients with schizophrenia? And for that, Andreas Bechthoff, he will speak about inpatient equivalent psychiatric care, STEP. He is professor of psychiatry in Berlin University at the Charité. Please, Andreas.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me and being part of this very important endeavor. Yeah, I will talk about inpatient equivalent home treatment, which has been recently introduced in Germany as a treatment modality and hopefully helps to make treatment more accessible for people with schizophrenia and might also be helpful in early intervention and early detection of psychosis. In international terms, you would probably say what has been introduced in Germany is a kind of intensive home treatment. And if you think of home treatment, there's actually, it's not moving. Sorry, could you move the slide then?
Yeah.
For me?
Now it works.
Now it works. Okay, thank you. As you can see on that slide, and there could be even more arrows on that slide, home treatment is implemented around the world, and there's are strong reasons to do that because it's still not going forward.
Could anyone? Yeah, thanks.
Home treatment, or as it's called, is also called in the literature crisis resolution, is recommended in many guidelines on treatment of severe mental illness or schizophrenia as an alternative to hospital admission in individuals with acute mental illness, because primarily users and carers prefer home treatment over inpatient care, and this is a very valid strategy, as we know from meta-analysis and systematic reviews, to reduce inpatient stay, as Peter Falkay already pointed out. But there are some shortcomings because most of those studies are older than 20 years and have methodological limitations, and mostly look only at inpatient stays, not at day clinic or home treatment usage in people who are included in home treatment models. So there's still a need for contemporary large-scale multi-center trials. Next slide, please. So in Germany, what was introduced in 2018 by Legacy was the so-called inpatient equivalent home treatment, which is a specific part of intensive home treatment. So it means that it is an acute treatment of patients who would normally be hospitalized, but the hospital-based teams would actually go out and see patients at their homes. It's a complex time-limited treatment provided by a multidisciplinary team, which consists of nurses, psychologists, psychiatrists, and social workers normally. And it's highly regulated in this way that daily, to be reimbursed by the health insurances, daily visits have to be performed, and also other procedures. So it's a very intensive care, because what you would usually see in crisis resolution, with how it is done in the UK or in other countries, is that people would not necessarily be seen every day by the home treatment team. Next slide, please. So what we did is we compared people in this intensive home treatment with patients in inpatient treatment. Please move forward. And we did a matched a propensity score matching with these two groups. So we included age, gender, numbers of previous inpatient or intensive home treatment stays, and diagnosis in the matching procedure. Next slide, please. We did this study in 10 centers in Germany. Next slide, please. And the primary outcome was, as Peter already pointed out, the reduction of inpatient stays. And as you can see here in the orange bar, which is the intensive home treatment group, and the yellow bar, which is the inpatient treatment group, at follow-up at 12 months, you can see that almost 20% less rehospitalizations took place in the group which has been treated in the home treatment group. And also in additional analysis, where I don't show the data now, if we include day clinic and also home treatment usage, still the group which received intensive home treatment did much better in terms of resource use of this more comprehensive care. Next slide, please. People in the intensive home treatment group, again, the orange bar, were more satisfied with treatment than the ones who received inpatient treatment. Next slide. And they felt more included into the treatment approach, so in terms of shared decision making. So again, as you can see, the orange bar is significantly higher than the yellow bar. Next slide. And although people only receive treatment at home and not the full comprehensive inpatient treatment, there were no significant differences in a 12-month follow-up in terms of symptom severity, quality of life, and treatment discontinuation. Next slide. We also did cost effectiveness analysis. So these are the two publications which came off with the main results and also with the cost effectiveness results. And in the second paper, we found that the intensive home treatment was not more expensive than inpatient treatment. So there were no differences in the overall costs between the two treatments. Next slide. So in another cohort, we looked at a longer follow-up time period, so not just 12 months as in the earlier study, but we looked at 64 months. And as you can see here, the black line is again the intensive home treatment group, and the red line is again the inpatient treatment group. You can see that even over the 36 months time period, the home treatment group had less inpatient stays in terms of number and also in terms of days. Next slide, please. So to summarize, at present, since this is now possible as part of the treatment, the hospital treatment, to offer also intensive home treatment to people with severe mental disorders, particularly schizophrenia. You can see in Germany we have around 400, 500 psychiatric departments in the country, and you can see that almost 1/4 now has started home treatment, this particularly home treatment, which I think is a good sign in order to make treatment more accessible, less stigmatizing to people with schizophrenia and severe mental disorder. Next slide. So to summarize, in terms of intensive home treatment, there are several advantages in line with the findings from earlier studies in home treatment. So people who use home treatment, they are more satisfied with treatment, they feel more involved in treatment, they actually have substantially less inpatient day clinic and home treatment use of psychiatric service at 12 months and also in the additional study at 36 months. It's not more costly than inpatient treatment. It is increasingly implemented in routine care in Germany, and hopefully it contributes to more participatory, recovery-oriented mental health service and also to early intervention, particularly in people with schizophrenia, because as Professor Moore pointed out, there's a strong need actually to develop more early intervention and to make psychosocial treatment more accessible to people with schizophrenia, and this might be a way to achieve that. Next slide. So I thank all the collaborators on these big active studies in 10 centers in Germany. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andreas. So very interesting. So what can you actually do, in order, and I think I'd like the term intensive treatment at home. So allow the patient to be treated at home. And yes, please, you want to ask a question, do so quickly and the quick answer. So
at 36 months follow up, or should I remember
in the chat?
Yeah. May I ask, so the question is whether at 36 months follow-up, which group had longer time to rehospitalization? It was also the group with home treatment. So the overall rate was lower and also a longer time to rehospitalization.
Thanks a lot. For more questions, scribble them down. So we come to the next talk. It's actually on another sort of aspect. So beside pharmacotherapy and psychotherapy, I think the question is, what can we do about lifestyle and exercise interventions? So Professor Lenzer from Lübeck and Münster, she's Professor of Psychiatry there, so she will actually talk about that. Please, Rebecca.
Yes, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. So I will try to take over the remote control for my contribution. Hope this works, but doesn't seem to. I asked for.
If not, you need it aided. Yes, please.
Yes, so I think there are two main questions I would like to focus on in my talk. The one thing is, what is lifestyles and why and how should we integrate lifestyle interventions in our treatment approaches? Because this seems to be something so very normal. Next slide, please. So first question, what is lifestyle about anyway? So if we ask our AI introduced in Dr. Google, he explains lifestyle refers to something very typical, normal way of life of an individual or a group. So concentrating on day-to-day behaviors, habits, and so on. So what does it include here? And this should be depicted here. It includes choices regarding diet, physical activity, work, leisure, and consumption patterns, which together influence health and well-being. And as we heard already here in this webinar, well-being is something, a very important outcome. So this may give us already the first reason why we should include it. So why integrate lifestyle intervention in treatment approaches? The first answer to this, from my perspective, is because psychopharmacology is not enough. And why is it like this, that psychopharmacology is not enough? We know already that from the Katie study, for instance, oops, do you move it forward or should I try to do it?
I think better they move, right?
Yeah. So next, please. So medication is not sufficient always. As we all know, there are a lot of symptoms that remain even we try to optimize medication. Another aspect, next please, please. Next. So we know about the non-adherence dilemma, and this is what the Katie study told us already. So if we look in the proportion of patients who do not follow our recommendations, 40% of this is because of the patient's own decision. Next one, please. So, and why do patients decide not to continue the medication as we recommend them? One important aspect is really severe metabolic side effects. For instance, tremendous weight gain, even in inducing type 2 diabetes. And here you see a work done by Pillinger and colleagues where they put together several, but here I show you two markers of metabolic risk, which is weight and glucose. And if you look, which has the highest risk, it's quetiapine and clozapine and also olanzapine. They have high risk, and these are actually medications we like to give to our patients. But we have to be honest enough against patients and ourselves that with this medication, we increase their cardiometabolic related mortality risk. So this is really something we have to consider. Next, please. So another aspect is that taking medication, especially for young patients, is not a normal thing, and it does not make fun at all. So what we need to convince patients about our treatment approaches is something that is normal and that may even make fun. Next, please. And all these things that are not normal have the potential to increase the aspects of self-stigmatization. So meaning that patients really feel bad about themselves. We know they have a low self-efficacy, and everything that's unnormal increases the extent of self-stigmatization. And this in turn will make patients, for instance, think about not taking their medications anymore. So next, please. So the normalizing approach is something that's very important, especially in psychotherapy approaches for patients with schizophrenia. So the lifestyle factors and this optimization can help to enhance well-being, as this is something that is well accepted in a society. And in the following, next please, I will concentrate on one aspect of lifestyle factors, and this is physical activity of daily living, and an extra aspect of this is exercise. Exercise is something that's planned, structured, goal-driven activity, for instance, training in a gym or on an ergometer. Next, please. So here we did an evaluation, a little survey in patients with schizophrenia and also in healthy controls. And what you can easily see is that the total time spent during a week in healthy people is much higher than in patients with schizophrenia. And especially what we see is that this is going back to the extent of sports. So exercise is something that really is something patients are not engaging very much. The daily activity in this slide here looks at it maybe also less in patients, but this was not statistically significant. Next, please. So generally, higher physical activity fitness levels predict better metabolic state, also in subjects with obesity, what we know from obesity research, for instance. So really the fitness level, so not so much the weight, but the fitness level itself. Next, please. Then in patients, for instance, better cognitive abilities are also related to more extensive daily physical activity and higher also objective fitness levels, like threshold of aerobic, anaerobic metabolization, for instance, which is a measure of objective fitness. Next, please. And what has been shown, for instance, by the group of Peter Falkay, is that these exercise levels and objective fitness levels are related indeed, for instance, to hippocampus volume. And as we saw already in the previous talk, hippocampus is something really crucial related to the neurobiology of schizophrenia. So there's even neurobiological proof that exercise, physical fitness, is important for patients with schizophrenia. Next slide, please. So it seems easy that enhancing physical activity is something important. So how can we convince patients? Because there are barriers to enhancing physical activity, as we all know. For instance, next slides, please. Barriers can be the symptom expression itself. For instance, negative syndrome expression can be something like depressive symptoms, low self-activity, and high extents of self-stigmatization, leading, for instance, to the fact that patients do not go to fitness centers also because they feel afraid of stigmatization. And other aspects like low income, they may not be able to afford a fitness center. And another aspect, even they know that they are less fit, or we can also prove that the objective fitness levels in patients are lower than in healthy control groups, that patients even underestimate their subjective fitness levels. So please, next slide. So we have to think about during therapy how to overcome these barriers. So if you are trying to recommend patients, think about the psychological aspects for motivation. Think about motivation. Become a cheerleader, really. I know one cheerleader that is also here today. That is Peter Falkay. I know how you started your research on exercise. And move away from reducing weight and BMI as a primary goal for physical fitness and physical activity. Next, please. invite patients even to professional fitness tests. Invite them to come and make it normal to do a professional fitness test. They will be even like it. Adapt your exercise recommendations to the individual patient's fitness levels. This is something very important, not just sending them to any group. Initiate supplementary physical activity programs to standard care, like cycling groups under free living conditions or other fitness groups, but on a more normal thing. And note, walking in subjects with a high BMI represents a comparable load to fast walking in subjects with lower BMI. So even enhancing normal physical activity in daily life may have an effect, a positive effect, reduction of the metabolic risk factors in these patients. Next, please. So here, this is from an ongoing trial where we give personalized recommendations of a baseline assessment with this professional fitness tests, and then we do telephone calls every 2 weeks. And here you see the motivational levels. What you see in the patients, that there's a high heterogeneity, but overall motivational levels are about 80% on a range between 0 and 100, going down a little bit to the end of this 3 months. And these telephone calls in our study here are done by a peer worker. Next slide, please. And this is something we introduced.
Rebecca, we need to.
Yeah, this is my last slide here. So
Right.
This is something what I can only recommend, like introducing in your research and also in a clinical settings peer workers who have an easier way to motivate patients, for instance, for enhancing physical activity. So I thank you for your attention.
Super.
And we can move to the next slide.
Thank you very much.
Speaker.
Okay, thanks a lot. So then coming to the last talk, because we need some time for the roundtable. So it's a privilege to introduce Gabriele Glocker. She will present relatives and affected people, patient advocate. Please.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to present a caregiver's view on the situation of German families affected by schizophrenia. Could you move the slides, please? Next slide. Right. Schizophrenia. Asmus Finsen described it as the most enigmatic mental disorder with as many faces as there are people affected. The people affected are young adults mostly. The people affected are families. In view of the great personal suffering and the immense societal burden, it is overdue to rethink care pathways towards early intervention, individual therapies, a holistic and recovery-oriented approach. As a mother and as a family representative in various committees, I greatly appreciate this rethinking process, unfortunately too late for my son to profit. This is my slide now. These are the major challenges for families affected by schizophrenia in Germany today: the stigma and the historical burden, the rejection of help due to anosognosia, the fragmented social welfare system, the shortage of mental health professionals. Next slide, please. The most significant challenge is the stigma and its historical burden. Schizophrenia is a public stigma affecting the whole family, and it is deeply rooted. For too long, the family was blamed to have caused the problem, so that many families stigmatize themselves. For German families, whether they are fully aware of it or not, schizophrenia is still associated with a hereditary defect, as it was seen by the pseudoscience and ideology of eugenics, widespread in the 19th and early 20th centuries. In no other country, however, did the mentally ill, and especially those diagnosed with schizophrenia, become victims of mass murder and compulsory sterilization. Will we ever overcome this collective trauma? Next slide, please. Maybe the toughest challenge is the rejection of help due to anosognosia. Families feel totally helpless when they realize that their son or their sister is suffering from paranoid delusions and they cannot convince them to go and see a doctor. In Germany, as in most other European countries, a person can only be subjected to involuntary treatment if there is an immediate risk that he or she could harm themselves or other people. Self-determination is a fundamental human right. But what about a person who feels remote controlled? What about a person who feels persecuted and causes a fatal accident? What about my responsibility as a mother who knows her son as a conscientious person who would never harm a fly? Why do I have to wait until disaster strikes before treatment becomes possible? Next slide, please. This was the wrong slide. Could we switch to further slides? No. We're moving backwards. Next one. So
start from the beginning and then go through and then you say stop, right?
Okay, that would be good. Yeah, stop.
One back. Okay.
Yeah. A big challenge is the fragmented social welfare system. In Germany, there is no crisis intervention service or mental health support available nationwide. Healthcare is within the competence of the 16 federal states, and each county has its own rules, its local mental health centers, and social psychiatric services that often have their own traditional names. So who can families in distress contact for assistance? Problems arise especially at the interfaces between hospital and follow-up care. Only hospitals are obligated to treat patients from the region, but they're quick to discharge them, too often without proper discharge management and without involving the family or the caretakers, who will, however, have to fill the gap if the network of community mental health service cannot take over the aftercare. Next slide, please. Finally, the challenge of the shortage of mental health professionals. Both inpatient and outpatient care are severely affected by the shortage of psychiatrists, psychotherapists, and experts in various fields of mental health care. There are waiting lists for patients, and there's no time left for discussions and counseling of family members or caretakers. Next slide, and last slide. Today, this can be said in summary. Families affected by schizophrenia in Germany feel particularly burdened by the implications of the stigma and its specific historical roots, the extreme powerlessness when they cannot prevent others from being harmed and their son from becoming burdened with guilt in a state of diminished responsibility, the shortcomings of the federal and historically grown welfare system, and last but not least, the shortage of mental health professionals. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for this clear talk. So you stay in, and I am happy to introduce, first of all, Bernhard Seidenat. So he should be in. I've seen him. Hello, good evening. He is from the Bavarian State of Parliament. Then we have Professor Andreas Meyer-Lindenberg representing the German Brain Council. Hello, Andreas.
Hello.
And then we have Christoph Korell from Berlin. Hello. And Gabriele Klocker. So that's the round. So just to summarize, we've started today with actually early detection and intervention, then went to the pathophysiology and asking what can we do there. Then I think what can we do in order to treat patients at home, then lifestyle and exercise interventions, and then a presentation from, let's say, people with lived experience and their relatives. Now, I'd like to start with a question first to Bernard Seidenat. Just to introduce you once more properly, you are actually a member of the Bavarian Parliament, and you are specifically you are heading a, let's say, working group or larger than that on health. And I have felt you're always very supportive for mental health issues. So my question would be, do we need a national strategy for mental health? Because the impression we have is that all of these things, we have 16 federal states, quite fragmented. So please.
Hello in this round, Mr. Falkay, thank you for inviting me. I would like to ask you on my own, why is it necessary to have a nationwide strategy? I'm a member of the Bavarian Parliament, and I think we have a good strategy in Bavaria for the new Mental Health Care Act, the helping for mental illnesses, people which are affected by mental illnesses. So I think that's a good strategy, and we have a crisis service in Bavaria for the people with mental illnesses. So I think that's good. That's wonderful. Why do we need a nationwide strategy on the federal level? I don't know. So as a Bavarian member of parliament, I don't know why that's necessary. So please tell me. I listened to Mrs. Glocker, yes, but I didn't hear an argument for this nationwide strategy.
Well, I start, but maybe the others can join. I personally think we have a national cancer strategy, right? And I personally think that it has risen the awareness on cancer a lot. So today, cancer has completely different, let's say, value in the population. And we, I think, often have the problem that, mental illness, beside the stigma, does not get the care we would hope. I mean, in Bavaria, for instance, you have a wonderful dementia program. And therefore, I would say that would be for me an argument to say, why not put it on a national level? But that's my view. I don't know whether other people like to join.
Other lenders can copy us. I think we have a dementia strategy. We have an autism strategy. Yes, we in Bavaria do that, and only we have something like this. I think there's a difference between the cancer strategy nationwide and the schizophrenia strategy, for example, because the treatment is very local. It's very important to have the people close to help them in the site, and there are many costs. So if you have a nationwide number, this 0800 655 3000, if it would be nationwide, people from the whole of the country would phone us in Bavaria. You need a team close to the patient, so you must have a lender-specific solution, I think.
Okay, thank you. But Andreas Meyer-Lindenberg, please, and then Christoph.
Yeah, I agree that country in the sense of lender-specific things are important, but I do think there's some advantage in national coordination. Just give a few examples. Coordinating scarce resources. So, for example, research and translational resources, something that we're doing in the German Center for Mental Health, that we're trying to coordinate and bundle things so everyone profits, although all are part of this and are excellent. There is some problems with the patchworks of legal regulations. For example, the psychiatric hospital laws of the Länder are very heterogeneous, and it is sometimes not easy to keep minimum standards, for example, from the point of view of psychiatric care for privacy, data protection enforced. This has recently become an important problem, the discussion about violence in mentally ill patients, their prediction, these kinds of things. So while I fully agree that this is anyway by our Grundgesetz devolved to the Länder, I do think there's some advantages in having these things harmonized. And just I'm speaking here for the German Brain Council, and we bring German topics into the European Brain Council, which does the same thing again then on the European level. There are individual excellences and problems in individual European country, and yet there is advantage in coordination that I do see.
Christoph.
Yeah, I want to reinforce what Andreas just said. You're obviously arguing from the advantage of having the highest standard and the highest resources. That's great. But we need not just other federal governments and structures to copy it, but to integrate this and coordinate this. So the harmonization of how reimbursement happens there, Bavaria is far ahead of other states, and we were really aching to get the same. So putting our forces together and elevate the floor and having better resource care across Germany would be enormously important. We have a very fragmented data system. So we're not Denmark, Sweden, or Finland, but we could be if the Länder would work together. We don't have good information from the health insurance claims data. So learning, even in quality assurance and improvement measures, that would enormously be helpful. And then, as Peter Falkay already said, education, campaigns, all of this works better, and there would be synergy. And I think also some duplication of effort and financing would go away. So it would be cheaper and more effective for all.
So after this wish, I mean, we have people online. So if anyone wants to ask, please write into the chat and we'll deal with that. But I'd like to come to another thing. And then, Christoph, as you have pointed out, I think we have addressed in the beginning early recognition and intervention. What do you think, Christoph? How can we bridge the gap in early detection? And maybe Nikos could join there. So what needs to be done in order to be able actually to treat people earlier and with that avoid chronicity?
Yeah, I think here a national initiative would also be helpful, having standards for early recognition and prevention services, getting child psychiatry and adult psychiatry work synergistically and not in isolation. I'm both a child psychiatrist and adult psychiatrist, and I think we must work together and not one group feeling threatened by the other because of this transitional psychiatry being an area and a time where a lot of these patients drop out of care or are not getting the appropriate standard of care. So here, national initiatives that learn from each other, that we have centers of excellence in larger cities that are then also servicing underserved areas are very important. And I think Nikos is already doing some of this with the DZPG, but Andreas Lindberg also has a point on that, I think.
Andreas, please.
Yeah, I didn't want to get ahead of Nikos, but just to, I think what Christoph says is right. There's a few things that I guess also would benefit from federal support that are important. So, example, one thing is Modellprojekte, something that we think is an optimal way to organize care in a region that, there's several model projects, for example, in Munich just recently one, but that in general requires some support and some coordinated action, because this is largely a discussion that we're having on the level of the payers, Krankenkassen, on the federal level. That's the dialectic between federal and Länder that I think applies to a lot of these things. And just to mention one more thing that's also in the country report, Germany, that we have been discussing in the Brain Council is the fragmentation of payers for long-term care. If we compare community treatment in Germany with, for example, the Netherlands and other countries, then the efficacy in the Netherlands is also partly due to the fact that they can do things that are not just in the domain of Krankenversorgung, but also in the domain of rehabilitative care. And that is, I think, enormously important and powerful, has been the topic of a recent report also brought before the Health Ausschuss of the Bundestag, and that should also be something that the Länder do in concert with the federal government, because obviously changing that structure is a big legislative task that I don't think any of the Länder can do alone.
Before I give on to Christoph, just to remind you, there is a country profile Germany. It's actually a paper which summarizes what is the state of art and what actually possibly needs to be done. And we are flagging a few points. So I'm looking at Bernhard Seidenat, so you will receive that. I think it's a nice summary on schizophrenia. And along that, thank you very much to Dr. Leo Franzen, who has substantially worked on that and put that together. Please, Christoph.
I just want to add that, especially for transitional psychiatry, where we have adolescents and adults, the big problem is that insurance companies give a higher reimbursement for the children, adolescents, and lower for young adults, although they also need a lot of help if they have first episode psychosis or mania, which then leads to dilution of care. That means that transitional psychiatry doesn't really work well. So having a nationwide approach here and telling the insurance companies to get out of this fight and create a bucket from 15 to 25 that is reimbursed the same way, because that is the time where basically up until 25, 50% of all psychiatric disorders have declared themselves. That is the time, the sensitive period, where we need to invest a lot. And when we're fighting about a couple of €100 for a day in the hospital, it's really very difficult on a regional or federal level. So we need a statewide level. We need this to be everyone working together. And I think that's where politicians can help us enormously.
Yes, please. Bernhard Seidenat.
I don't want to make this discussion longer, but not only for some arguments. I heard your arguments, but Bavaria is bigger country than the Netherlands, than Austria, than Denmark, and we have good standards. Our free state standard could become federal standard, but that's not in my might. You have to ask the German Bundestag, and I think it's very good that we have a federal level, and we have federal competences of the 16 Länders. But I want to say, if I may, that they have 6 big aims in Bavaria for helping people with mental illnesses. And one big aim is the improve of the database. We have the European framework, European health data space. That's okay. We need it. And so some points of the helping system, you must think in a broader way, in the overarching way, in the federal or European way of thinking. So that's okay. That's wonderful, and we have, perhaps you can say it at another time. We have our Bavarian psychiatric report, the second one, which was published last year by the Bavarian State Ministry of Healthcare and Prevention. So that's a very important data collecting for the people there. These are things that are seeking their own in the federal level. So I think Bavaria has a leading role, and I think we can be proud of this. And if Germany will copy it, it should copy it.
Thank you very much. So maybe after we had sort of the idea of a nationwide plan for mental health. Then we went into early intervention and recognition. Now sort of going back to the ideas we actually have here, so large data set. A final topic before we come to an end would be for me digitalization. Andreas Meyer-Lindenberg. So what would you think? What is needed really in order that AI digitalization is penetrating, let's say, mental health more effectively? You have the impression that medicine is maybe a bit quicker, other countries are a bit quicker. So what needs to be done?
That's a good and relatively big question. I think AI needs the requisite database to be allowed into the psychiatric space. We're largely not at a point where we would, from a regulatory point, say this is ready for prime time, but we're getting there. For example, Nico's coordinating a very big project that does that in the space of early recognition. There's a range of studies ongoing, for example, in treating refugees and using AI for text-based interventions. If we achieve that, then AI will have, I think, in psychiatry, a unique role to play because our disorders are especially in need of and benefiting from the personalization that AI can afford. And a lot of our treatments are text-based, language-based, and so they're very suited to what AI can do these days. We have a good ecosystem, I think, in Germany with bringing such innovations into the market and to the patients. Look at the success that DiGAs, digitale Gesundheitsanwendung, have had here. So this is all good. We need to be mindful that especially the European regulation doesn't create a big problem for innovation in Germany. That has been a problem relative to other nations in using the requisite training data, bringing them to the market. We need to be sure that AI is free of bias, these things that are relevant when you train things. So we have homework to do. That homework is largely at the interface of translational research and clinical application, but then we have a good ecosystem to do it. And we've done a lot of work also at the DZPG, the German Center, and looking at the interests that stakeholders have, that patients with mental illness and their relative have in using AI and using digital medicine. And fortunately, that's very high. Both the digital literacy of people with mental health is high and their willingness to use these things. So I think we have good opportunities if we choose to use them.
Thank you very much. Short remark from Christoph, then I hand over to Frederick and Vincian for closing.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I agree with Andreas Meyer-Lindenberg entirely. The brain is only as good as its body in executing something. So basically, we need data, but we need measurement-based care. So that's something that we in clinical units have to establish in order to have self-reports, patient-reported outcomes measures, that we get the patient where they are at, what they need and want, but also that clinicians add some measurement to their care that then can be utilized even better with AI techniques. And that's what we can do right now. And this needs to be harmonized across centers, and hopefully the DZPG can also help there with input from patients, families, and caregivers.
So thank you very much. I think we've started with early detection intervention, did some pathophysiology, went inpatient care, exercise, lifestyle, and then sort of relatives and patients with lived experience. And then I think had an interesting roundtable. Please, Fred and Vincian, close the session.
Vincian, over to you.
You're mute.
You're on mute, Vincian.
Maybe Fred, you close it then.
Oh yeah, I'll go ahead. Yeah. So today's webinar is
phase 3. Vincian, there is an echo. I think you need to use Tao's mic and close yours.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, try again.
can't hear you. Why don't you close it, Fred? It doesn't work.
Okay. Well, sorry about this technical glitch for the end, but simply
life is imperfect.
Well, you know, and so it had to come from someone, and given your performance for everyone was perfect so far, we needed to take you know, that part of. But more seriously, we wanted, Vinciane and I wanted to conclude first and foremost by providing our thanks to everyone participating, but also to all our speakers for your contribution, as well as to you, Peter, personally, for this excellent chairing and moderation. But also, and as a first way of conclusion, to provide also this bigger perspective as to where we stand with the Rethinking Schizophrenia project, that today's webinar was really the deep dive in the country profile for Germany, but it resonates with the country profiles we did for other countries. We started with Poland during their presidency of the EU. We also managed to do one in Denmark, and all the outcomes of the project, which is a 3-year project actually, conducted under the aegis of EBC, but together with the EPA, Gamian Europe, other member societies and member organizations, as a very clear sign and demonstration of the input we can leverage and the great expertise that we are leveraging, also in collaboration with national brain councils and the German brain councils in particular, for which we really would like to acknowledge the contribution, because starting from the lived experience of people living with a brain condition, but also making sure that we give the voice to scientists, to clinicians, and to all experts in the value chain to try and respond to the needs, is the best way by which we have managed to provide evidence on the unmet need, but also to provide the recommendations as to the best way to address complex challenges in a multi-stakeholder and multidisciplinary approach. And I think that today, again, we demonstrated the way by which we can think globally, or at least for an overarching perspective, but by thinking globally, we very much concentrate our effort as to how we impact and act locally, because most of you have really emphasized the need to make sure that we provide efficient mechanism and find efficiency as to the best way and the best level of action in order to respond to the unmet need and really seek to improve outcomes for people living with a brain condition. I think that today we also had a voice from policymakers that we continuously will gently challenge and also hold accountable to answer to these needs, whether they act at the regional, at the national, at the European, but also at an international level. And it is really across that chain that we will seek to respond to these needs. And our real appreciation, Bernard, for your participation this afternoon, but also looking forward as to how we integrate all of that now in the plan of EBC and its member societies for a coordination plan for the brain at the European level, which is really our endeavor for 2026 and the upcoming years. So again, a great thank you on our behalf, and looking forward to the next steps on our journey, and have a great continuation of the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.